we kept going with that. I don't have a pension, right? Because I'm a private. I started my clinics. I had 4 clinics, so I bought those 4 buildings that the clinics were in. So I owned all the office buildings. And then we expanded to we have 3 boys. They want to go to university. Well, we didn't have any money for housing. So when they went to Waterloo, we purchased a really nice house in a nice neighborhood, threw some drywall up in the dining room, and we had an extra bedroom and said, rent it out. And then we started buying more properties in Waterloo. And at one point we had 5 or 6 of them just before the boom started. And then
this is the Money Seed Podcast, where we discuss all things investing, plain and simple, the way it should be. Please remember, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be investment advice. Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. Today, I'm very happy to have Hank Svec. Hank, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gabe. Good to be here.
Hank has an amazing story. So Hank has got a background in business. He started multiple businesses on his own, everything from ice cream to farming to investing in dozens of startups. Hank is now, he also got into real estate and land investing and everything in between. Hank has a lot of very interesting lessons on business, on life, and honeybees as well. Hank, where do I begin with your story? I guess, why don't we start with ice cream? I think that was probably one of the first businesses you started back in the day.
Yeah, to start there, right? Okay, sure. I'd be happy. So very quickly, so what happened was I was at Michigan State going to school, and they had the Michigan State Dairy. And so they actually had a dairy on campus where they made ice cream. So we would go there with our family, my family. I was there for 2 years, my wife, 2 children as an adult student in grad school. So I was nearing the end of my residency there, and I started talking to the production manager. He said, well, I'm retiring this week. And I said, well, since you're retiring, would you teach me how to make ice cream? He said, sure. So I went there for one day and I learned all the ins. In one day, I took a basic one-on-one mentorship, came back to the farm where we had a fruit farm here where we grew cherries. That's how I paid my way through Michigan State in the summers and most of my high school, college days. So I thought, hey, I'll just start an ice cream company. So we started making ice cream out of fruit that we had on the farm. And we gradually grew. We had a franchise system. We had 2 in London, Ontario, in malls, which, was difficult. This was the 90s, the early 90s. So we opened up these places, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Like, I had no idea. I didn't even know how to make ice cream, really. When I was in Michigan, you pick up the phone in the morning and you call 5 dairies and get 5 different quotes for cream. And it's amazing. You come to Ontario, there's one provider. We have a milk board.
The milk board.
and it's the same price no matter where you go. And when you're a little guy, I didn't read the leases. I didn't know how to handle product control. I didn't know how to work with employees, money management. At that time, I remember our line of credit was 22%. And when we opened one of the mall stores, I remember the first month we had $15,000 in ice cream sales, which is pretty good. The next day, they closed the entrance for construction and we went down to $3,000.
Oh my word. And Hank, when you say these were franchises, was this like a well-known brand like Baskin Robbins or something similar?
No. We started. It was called Svec's Gourmet Ice Cream, which was the dumbest name.
Okay. So you started your own franchise. Wow.
And we made everything on site. So when you went to our store on the farm, you got farm produce and cherries and raspberries made into ice cream. This was the early 90s. If you went to London, Ontario, we had an ice cream making room in the back of that store where we made ice cream. But it was highly inefficient, quality control issues. Long story short, we didn't declare bankruptcy, but we had to get out of there. My wife and my mom did some late night removal of equipment. So, because we were, a batch freezer cost $15,000 back then. And if you try to sell it used, you might get 4. So I think I got about 3 MBAs in those 2 years. I had 5 jobs at the time. I had 2 full-time jobs. I would leave my 12 hours. I was interning to be a psychologist. So I had a 12-hour shift at the hospital. I'd leave the hospital at 7 p.m. I worked 7 to 7. I'd drive an hour and a half from this place to London, to the mall. I'd make ice cream for 5 hours. I turn around, drive back, have some snooze, then I drive back to another job. So I had 5 jobs. We had 2 children, actually 3 at the time. My wife is a gem, of course, and got through all of it. It was negotiating with banks, landlords, lease. I mean, it was just, now it's a great, I mean, it still hurts. I wrote about it in the book, and it still hurts to even talk about it, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
So Hank, I think you hit up on a lot of important topics right there. One, when you mentioned about the 3 MBAs, you learn a lot more. Like, you learn a lot more from actually doing something, right, from your own experiences than you do from like reading a book usually.
Yeah, like I've got a lot of degrees. You know that, right, Gabe? I've got like 5 degrees or something.
You're a psychologist by training, right?
I retired. So I've got a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Ed, Master of Ed, Ph.D. And then I call myself like really the only MBAs I got, I call it an ice cream MBA. I didn't, because it's practical, right? You go out there, you do things, you get hammered. Like 22% was crazy. I remember the money would go into the bank that month. We did 15 grand, and the bank would take it right away to pay down debt. We had no cash to run the business. It was at zero every day, and it was like the worst, because that was a dumb thing I did with the bank. How I set up the banking. Like, I didn't know about finance. I didn't know about anything. And then fortunately, I started to get into real estate, which really basically saved our lives financially.
So Hank, let's get back to the ice cream business.
You had to, eh? I was trying, so I was trying to like go the other way. Go ahead.
No, but I think, so one of the things you mentioned, is like, nothing beats experience. Second thing is, it sounds like you were very fortunate. You had a partner who was completely committed to that idea, right? I mean, it sounds like your wife was in there helping you make the ice cream, pulling all-nighters, etc. So
she was tough. She handled the kids and took care of the entire household and kept everybody sane while I was pretty much insane. So she saved the family. She's supportive. She's strong. She's tough. And I married up, right? Smartest thing. Marry up. Marry someone who's smarter than you, better looking, all that stuff. And I'm telling you, if it wasn't for Mary, nothing would have happened. It would have been bad news. Really.
It's very, especially when you're raising a family, it's so important to have a partner that supports you and your ideas and your goals. I mean, there's no substitute for that.
And is really smart. Like really smart, and gives amazing advice, and is on the other end. Like, I've got that ADD thing and I'm impulsive and stuff. And she is like, she'll reflect and then give you an answer in a word or two that you think, oh man, why didn't I think of that like 3 days ago?
But I imagine at the time you were both, right? You and your wife were both in your 20s or late 20s, right? So you're both still trying to figure out life, right? I mean, yes.
Oh, she'd still make ice cream too. The kids would be sleeping. We'd be out there making ice cream, and she'd run a store. She did all the management of the finances as far as trying to keep things sane, as far as books go. But she was a big part of the whole thing, and supportive as get out, just really supportive. I mean, when I came home, remember, I was a teacher, and I came home one day and I said, I think I want to go to school. And she says, well, we got 2 kids. You got a job for life. You're teaching in Canada. I said, no, I want to go to school. So I applied to all these schools. And I said to her, I can't apply to Michigan State. It's a Big Ten. They'll never take me. I'm a Canadian guy. Why would Michigan take? She said, just apply. So I applied and I actually got in. It was crazy. I get into all my American schools. I couldn't get an interview in a Canadian school.
And this was for your PhD program, or?
Yeah, because I played college football. I didn't go to class much in Canada, but I wrote a lot of papers. Right when I graduated, I was working as a teacher with street kids who got kicked out of school and lived on the street. And I wrote a lot of papers and I advocated for them. And so Michigan State and all the American schools loved it because I had all these publications. Canada didn't care; they just wanted to know what my grades were.
Hank, last question, I promise, related to ice cream.
No, ask me all you want. I'm just kidding. Ask me all you want. I don't care.
So if you could summarize, what are the top 2 or 3 lessons you learned about that adventure?
The ice cream business.
Yes.
Okay. Number 1 would have been understand the market. I'll give you more than one because there's a few that pop up. Number 2, you remember that you're in Canada and people don't want to buy ice cream when it's minus 30. 6 months out of the year, there's really no business, right? Especially in a standalone store. If you're in a mall, you have some chances. Know your leases, money management, financial management, understand cash flow, and do more long-term planning. Get a chemist involved, food technologist who can tell you how to actually make ice cream. Buy better prices, be tough. And I think probably in general, I was talking to someone today about this. Sometimes with certain individuals, kindness is interpreted as weakness. And I see that on the farm when I watch the bees. There's no emotion with the bees, right? It's a brutal world they live in. There's no emotion. It's just fight, survive, and survive, right? But I was dealing with a contractor today who interpreted my kindness as weakness. Because every once in a while, I keep thinking contractors are okay. I think the real estate industry, the building industry, construction industry, it has to be the most corrupt industry on the planet. Because when you get I'll give you a quick example. When you get a quote on something, let's say you're going to get something painted, the outside of a wooden house painted, and the quotes for the same product go from, say, $12,000 to $28,000. Simple question: how's that possible?
Yeah, different size companies, different size overhead. Yeah.
Sure. Or you get a quote.
People's different expectations of how much money they want to make and how hungry they are to get the job.
Yeah, and you send a quote in. They send you a quote and it says it's not really a quote. It's kind of an estimate. So if I run into trouble, you're going to pay for it. No, I don't need to do the job. It's like Warren Buffett. I'll stand at the plate for 50 years before I'll write an empty check for you. So those are the kind of things I learned in the ice cream business, because landlords, leases, bankers, all those kinds of things. That's probably too much, but it's in there all the time. I mean, I think about when I'm involved in a deal or something, I think about a lot of things, and some of them go back to that experience.
So Hank, how did you transition into real estate?
Well, I was broke, obviously. I tell the story. We were in a Honda Civic with my two kids and my wife. I think we had one child with my parents because we could only put 4 kids. We drove by a thing I called the Mushroom House. I don't know if you heard that podcast, the Mushroom House. It was a really probably C- quality house right beside a railroad tracks. And in the back was someone who had part of the property was a mushroom factory where they were going to grow mushrooms. It looked like a really big garage. Okay. It was a foreclosure in 1988. Had an $89,000 mortgage on it. I remember I called Jack Kerr, my lawyer at the time. I says, Mr. Kerr, I said, it's got a mortgage of 89. What do I have to offer? 89? He says, no, offer whatever you want. Well, hell, okay. So I offered 50. I got it for 52, got it appraised. Bank gave me 56 on closing. I had $3,000 in my pocket after the deal. My wife, remember, we're living in Michigan State, Spartan Village, not eating well. And this, I got kids. I got a check for $3,000. And even though it was a 14% mortgage, I was able to get enough money from the house to be able to pay the mortgage. And then I rented the back for guys who wanted to work on cars away from their house and wives. So I had 4 basic garages. And at one point we had them all rented at $200 a month. We didn't have power back there. So I was getting $800. So on average, I was probably bringing home $600 a month, which is huge back then. And today is good. Yeah. But back then, that was huge. And so we just started getting into it. So then we started doing that. And then we kept going with that. I don't have a pension, right? Because I'm a private. I started my clinics. I had 4 clinics. So I bought those 4 buildings that the clinics were in. So I owned all the office buildings. And then we expanded to we have 3 boys. They want to go to university. Well, we didn't have any money for housing. So when they went to Waterloo, we purchased a really nice house in a nice neighborhood, threw some drywall up in the dining room, and we had an extra bedroom and said, rent it out. And then we started buying more properties in Waterloo. And at one point we had 5 or 6 of them just before the boom started. And then when we saw what was happening in Waterloo, we sold them all. We sold, and I also got involved with solar at the time. We had this incredible solar opportunity. So we started doing solar. And then I had another son go on to the East Coast, and he was doing a career where he wanted to volunteer for a year to learn the profession that he wanted to get into, but he had no income. So he said, well, we'll buy a building and make him manage it in the town where he's going to be working for free for 12 months. So we did that. And then we bought more in that town and more. So it's all luck, blind luck. We just got lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea, right? Anyone who sends their children away to school to a different city, right? Get them into a duplex, make the child live there, rent out the other side of the duplex, or even, like you said, rent it out by the room to other students. It's a great way to house hack. It's good for the child, right? The kid learns about business. The
Right.
kid saves a ton of money. And when he graduates, he can probably flip that house or refinance it and have some money in his pocket as he starts life. I mean, I think that's an absolutely fantastic way to get kids through college.
Well, you got to remember, Gabe, it was need. I wasn't very smart. It was need. We had no choice. But here's the thing I learned from the bees, you see, which makes sense today. When things aren't going well, they move. Okay. So a beehive will move. If it's wet, if they get attacked too much, they all get together. They just fly off and they go to another place. People today seem to think I have to live in Toronto, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Vancouver. No, you don't. Like I use the example. I don't know if we talked about that before. You can go to East Coast Canada. You can buy a duplex for $250,000. You can rent in a half, and this is Ocean View. You can rent one half, right? Live in the other half, pay nothing. You have high-speed fiber optic internet. You can work there. Beautiful towns, a great environment. Like, so you move. If you have a house in a place like San Francisco, are they worth what, $5 million? Like how much?
Millions. Yeah. I mean,
you could retire, Gabe, and move to the East Coast.
Yeah.
I got some land. I can get you set up out there.
Well, thanks, Hank. I mean, maybe we'll talk after the episode here. But no, I agree with you completely. Right? Is that there's this mentality, and I saw this when I was growing up in Canada, is a lot of people just don't want to move. And people can always find a million excuses why they don't want to move, right?
Yep.
Oh, my friends are here. Oh, my family's here. Oh, I have a good job. Or, like I've been working at this company for 4 years. I might get a promotion next. And you can always come up with a million reasons why they don't want to move. But you're right. I mean, you have to chase opportunity. If there's an opportunity in a better town for a better quality of life, you got to chase it. And
see, that gets to value, yeah. Gabe, it gets to value. So that I'll give you an example. A few years ago, someone said to me, yeah, this doesn't work in Toronto. I said, okay, I found a triplex in Toronto for $820,000. It was a C class. Needed some work, right? But on a subway, close, in Toronto, you could have bought that, fixed it up, lived for free. And the person I was talking to said, yeah, but I don't want to live in that kind of place. What do you mean that kind of place? Well, it doesn't have a doorman, it's not close to the Jays. They can't watch hockey at the Garden. I said, what are you talking about? You're like 24 years old. You don't know anything. And it's like, what do you mean I don't know anything? I said, well, you don't know anything. I didn't know anything. So what me? And so it's like this sense of, sort of fatal thinking. I can't do anything because, so move. The bees move. Why would you stick around? Move.
Yeah, exactly. And especially nowadays when real estate prices are so prohibitively high in places like Toronto and Vancouver. I mean, I can understand somebody in their early 20s, they just graduated from college, they don't have enough money for down payment, their job pays less than $100,000 a year, and now they're looking at houses that might be worth 6, 7, 800, and they just can't, even if they wanted to get that triplex, they probably can't get the down payment, etc. I understand, but I agree with you is that chase opportunities somewhere else. There is somewhere else in Canada where you can afford it. Now with COVID, a lot of people working remote. That opens up a whole nother world of possibilities with, like you said, buy an affordable home somewhere else in Canada and work remote. And all of a sudden now life is a lot more affordable.
Well, like we talked about, you have to have a supportive partner, right? The person you're with has to say, okay, I'm willing to move to the East Coast or go to another part of America where it's maybe less expensive. But you have to seek the opportunities when they're there. I mean, I think of my parents and your parents probably the same thing. The risk, can you imagine getting up today and saying, okay, I'm leaving everything behind to a country where I can't speak the language. I have a few resources, and I'm going to start over because that's better for my children. I got to tell you a quick story. I was at a store today, and I was going in there because my wife, we were at the dentist. We did in the dentist. I'm walking in. This poor woman was lying by the entranceway, homeless, on a pillow on the pavement, right? And I've never been able to just walk by. So I go into the store and I say to the person, like, there's a woman out there who needs some help. Yeah, but she doesn't really want any help, she says. Oh man, is there a social? Can we call somebody? No, you can't call. There's nobody to call. And I don't know what it is. I think like today, you think about the genetic lottery we all have, right? How come we were had parents who came over to the countries they did, and how come we're not on the street or in Syria? Or I think that's what happens when you get old. You're pretty young, Gabe, but when you get old, you start asking these questions. Like, so we have to do as much as we can, right? Every day you get up and you say, okay, how can I teach kids to not make ice cream mistakes? That's kind of like, because that's a waste of a long time. You got to suffer a little bit, but do you really have to do is suffer that much? What do you think about the suffer thing? Kids don't suffer enough. Young people, I'm talking 20s, as far as business failures, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think I have two views on the subject. One is that in general, I think we're not doing a good job of raising and educating our children. I think I hate this word, I hate to use this word, but we're raising them too soft, right? We're not teaching them that failure is okay. We're not teaching them that you're not going to get everything you want. We're not teaching them that, sometimes you're not going to win that particular race. You're going to come in 5th or 10th, and that's okay. And, sometimes life is hard, and sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and work, right? And I think today kids have this expectation that life is somehow, there's this cookie cutter approach to life, which is just be a B, get B's in high school. Like, you don't have to get A's or A pluses, just be an average student, go to an average college, and then after that, get an average job, and everything's going to be great. You're going to have this wonderful house with 2 cars and a swimming pool, and you're going to go to Disney World every summer, and life's going to be great. And the problem is, I think, especially in the area where I grew up, right, which is like in the Detroit, Michigan kind of area, that kind of was okay. Like, that was a possibility in the 1960s and 70s, right? Somebody barely graduated high school. They got a job at Ford or GM. They had a guaranteed job for life, fantastic pension, healthcare, and houses were like $100,000, $150,000 a year, bought you a half decent house. So that's it. Their house, they got a nice house. And I think the next generation in America hasn't clued into the fact that the world has changed in the last 30, 40 years. And that kind of mentality, it means you're going to be chasing a dream your whole life, right? And the other side is, a lot of people are realizing now, and that's why I love YouTube, is there are young people, and I'm so empowered by this. There's this group of like 25, 30-year-old kids all over YouTube now who are fully embracing the hustle culture, right? They're doing what you did with the ice cream store. They're opening 2 businesses. They're getting into real estate. They have a YouTube channel. They're like doing affiliate marketing on Instagram. They have 3, 4, 5 businesses going, and they realize that working hard and hustling is usually, in this day and age, probably more successful than going to college, getting some random degree, right?
Absolutely.
And so there's a small group of youngsters right now who are really catching on to the fact that there's this tremendous opportunity where if they outwork, the average high school student, as it were, that there's a tremendous opportunity in America, as I'm sure there is in Canada, if you're just willing to just hustle and work hard.
If you work hard, you will own it. Okay. But we have to define work hard. I watched a NCAA top tier basketball coach say he had to stop practice one day and talk to his players about what it means to work hard. They didn't know what it meant. And another day he had to talk about what it meant to come on time. They didn't know what it meant to come on time. Seriously.
What do you mean?
This is an NCAA Division I serious basketball program. And they didn't know what work hard meant, what hustle meant, what attitude meant, and they didn't know what it meant to come on time. Like 8 o'clock was 8:15, 8:30. And this is everywhere, Gabe. This is like, so when you think about, I wish my guidance teacher said one thing to me in high school. If you work hard, you can do whatever you want. I didn't hear that. I heard about all this ability stuff. No, you don't have enough ability to do this. Even at university, I'll tell you the greatest revenge I got when they wouldn't let me into grad school at Western, University of Western Ontario. Mm-hmm. When I graduated Michigan State, I went back and lectured there. They forgot about it, right? They said, we need a guy, some people are on sabbatical. So I went, that was one of my 5 jobs. I went there 2 days a week and lectured 4 classes. I was a top rated prof there. Even though I was part-time, they sent me tenured guys to help them be better lecturers.
Amazing. I love that story. That's a great
story.
And
it was all about revenge, right? I said, I don't care. You make up a game today, even though I'm 66, I will figure out, I'll do this. I'll beat you. Yeah. It might take me 10 years. I have no talent, but I will beat you.
And you know what? I love that mentality, because that's something that I come across all the time, where successful people, every time they get rejected, or every time, something doesn't work out, they use that as motivation to work harder, motivation to reach that next level, right? To prove other people wrong, right? And
then when you get old, though, it's internalized. So then when you get old, those people don't matter anymore. And that's kind of the scary part, because then they don't affect you at all. I get more sad for those folks than I get motivated, because you hear it so much. You just shake your head and you go, okay, whatever. I feel bad for you.
Yeah. Getting back to the whole thing about kids, and it's similar to what you're mentioning, is like, I look at my older daughter. She is 15 right now. She's in high school. And I feel like we're raising a generation of kids in high school where we tell them that nothing is ever their fault, right? Like, if they get a D, it must have been because the curriculum was too hard, or, the teacher wasn't accommodating enough, right? Or nobody, gave them an extra week, right, to finish the assignment, or the assignment wasn't appropriate for them, or, maybe, right now they're feeling really stressed out, and, then maybe this assignment shouldn't count, or nobody talked to them about their anxiety levels or whatever. And so we give them like this impression that they never do anything wrong. Anything that happens that is not ideal, it's not their fault. It's the system. It's something else. It's the stupid adults. It's whatever. And so I think a lot of kids are growing up thinking they've never done anything wrong, right? And so when they hit the real life in their 20s, it's a real shock for them, right?
Well, two things. A few years ago, I wrote a book, a horrible title. Don't Be a Wimp, Raise a Strong Leader. Worse, I'm going to rewrite it the next winter and with some new stuff. I went around and I found 6 people to interview. I wanted to interview the parents of strong leaders. Okay. 2 people I knew very well. 2 people I barely knew, and 2 were strangers. So I went from British Columbia to Nova Scotia. I interviewed the mother and a grandmother of Kimberly Joynes, who was a Paralympic skier, who at 18 broke her back doing a snowboarding stunt. Okay. So I wanted to find out how do you raise someone to be so strong and it was from my experience of 30 years in clinical practice. I knew the answers, but I wanted to get some real life stories, right? All the same, hard work. You're not all that. You have to work. You haven't achieved anything. Okay. So the girl breaks her back and she's being pushed into the ER. And she says to me, the mother says to me, when she's going into the ER, all she says to me is, Mom, this is good because I got a better chance to make the Paralympic team than the Olympic team. And she's 18.
Incredible.
Okay, so you're thinking,
wow.
Forget all. Just how is someone that strong to be so tough and say that? And the moms and the grandmother perks up. Yeah, the grandmother's the same. And you look at these people. We had coffee in Kelowna, BC. I flew out to Kelowna to interview them in a coffee shop. She was getting ready for the Vancouver Olympics. The girl, Kimberly, she's going into the same coffee shop. I didn't know this. She slips and breaks her hip and misses the Vancouver Olympics. I said, well, what did you do then? What do you think I did? She said, I rehabbed. I'm thinking, weren't you a little upset? And so the theory of this whole book, and a lot of my colleagues hated the book, right? They got mad at me because I said, discipline's important. Don't give kids everything they want. There's what I call a natural no and a strategic no. A natural no is what I had with my kids. I didn't have any money. So if you said you want to play hockey, you're not playing hockey. My wife and I said running shoes and shorts. That's all we can afford. Okay. A strategic no is your kid wants a new phone and you can pay for it because you have a lot of money, but you say no because you know it's not right for them. A strategic no is impossible as a parent because you want to always do better. You want your kids to be happy. You don't want them to suffer. But we forget our job as parents. I said to my wife the other day, when I'm dead, it'll be a couple days and my kids will be fine. Our kids will be fine. They're independent. They're incredible dads and husbands and fathers. And it's a joy to watch. But that's so much work, right? It's hard work raising kids. It's easier just to say, you want another phone? No problem. Order it. Not good. I mean, and then when I retired, this is an interesting one. When I retired from my practice and the next group took over, they had a little party and they said, okay, what do you remember about Dr. Svec that is most memorable? Everybody said the same thing. When I had my first interview with him, he asked me this question. If 100% is everything you know in your profession, what percent do you think you know now as far as skills, background, education, training to do the job. And most would say 75%. So then I would always say, well, I've been at it 25 years and I'm just hitting 18 to 20% on a good day. Yeah, but I went to this school. I said, look, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. And that'd be the end of the interview. And they'd get hired. They remembered that interview for 30 years. I felt bad at the, you're retiring and, the first time in your life you hug a staff. I never hug anybody. There was no contact in my office. It's always high fives, all that ethical. But when you're, a civilian, you give people a hug. So they said, and I thought, I feel bad. And they go, no, that motivated me because you're right. I didn't know anything. But today, people right out of school, they know everything, Gabe.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me the most.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's part of life, right? Life will teach that to people. I remember when I graduated from mechanical engineering, which was my first degree, I was pretty arrogant, getting in his young 20s, I'm an engineer.
Yeah, you're a smart guy, Gabe. See, I graduated high school with a 60%. What was your high school percentage? Come on.
It was good. I got good grades in high school. I didn't get very good grades in university, but high school, sure. And then, I got a job as a mechanical engineer in the auto industry. And I, being arrogant, young, whatever, I thought I knew it all. And of course, very quickly, the job told me that I don't know it all. And it was because the stuff that gets you through the day at an automotive company as an engineer is not the stuff you learn in school. Like the stuff you learn in school is all theoretical knowledge. It's all stuff you learn on the job. It's how that particular company does things. It's what your boss's expectations are. It's what the company's expectations are. A lot of the things they never teach you in school, like how do you talk to a customer? How do you talk to your manager? How do you share work with your colleagues? Like all this kind of stuff you don't learn in school. This is all kind of, you pick it up on the job. A lot of it is trial and error. And you're right. After a few years, I realized, I don't know as much as I think I do. But it took a while. I mean, life has to kind of kick you in the butt to.
But isn't it great every day to learn? Like we talk about the Honeybees was sort of a new thing 5 years ago. I'm still involved with real estate and stuff. Every day is like an incredible gift, to be able to go out there and learn something, get knocked around, and just experience it. And my kids are doing great, but then Mary and I have mentored some young entrepreneurs, just a couple that had the character that we wanted to put time in, and they're all so successful. It's crazy. We just love seeing their success, and we don't know them. We just knew them through, my son contacted me, said his friend needed some advice. So Mary and I started working with him, and he's now doing exceptionally well. And the other couple that now own my practice are just owning the world. So it's so much fun to help and see that success, right? See them, and hard work ethic, ethical, strong character, tough people that do the right thing and take care of people too.
Yeah, and I think people who are entrepreneurs from an early age, almost all of them have a few failures, right? So it's kind of like, that you talk about survivorship bias. It almost selects people who are resilient, right? Like I tried a business, I failed. I tried another business, I failed. I took the things I learned in my first two businesses. I started a third business, and look, I succeeded. And so right away, you're almost selecting for people who are resilient, who are hardworking, who don't take no for an answer, right? Whereas a lot of people just try a business, doesn't work, they give up, and they go for the security of a 9-to-5 job, which is perfectly fine, right? But I think right away, if you meet somebody who is a successful entrepreneur and they've been doing it for years and years, chances are you're going to find that they're resilient, hardworking.
Do you think anybody can be an entrepreneur, Gabe, or do you think it's a part of the genetic crazy stuff from our parents?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's a good question. No, I don't think anyone can do it. But I think a lot more people can do it than they think they can. I think a lot of people have it in them. A lot of people are just too scared to try. I think it's very, very difficult to leave the financial and psychological security of a good job.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you think you have a good job.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I think, we're not raised that way, right? So my experiences in high school and university and just the education system in general, it was there to create worker bees, right? It's there to create, to learn this idea that somebody always tells you what to do. You have to do it. Like you said, you have to be on time. You got to work hard. At the end of the day, you get an attaboy. At the end of the week, you get a paycheck. And that's what the system is gearing you up for, right? And you have to go out of the way to learn about how to run a business. You have to want it. You have to go out of your way to do it.
Let me ask you a question. In your career, did a lot of people say to you when you disagree with them, someday we'll see how far you get with your methods and we'll see how far I get with mine? Did you get a lot of those kind of comments?
Not a lot. I think maybe like when I was in my early 20s. Yeah. In the auto industry, there's definitely like set ways of doing things. And it's not appreciated to like think outside the box. It's like, no, this is how we do it. But I don't think I've gotten those remarks maybe like in the last 10 years or so. But definitely
no, but
early on in my
did
career.
You get them early in life, right?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Did you ever think of calling them up now and saying, hey, let's have a coffee, see how we did?
No, I don't hold grudges. I really don't.
Oh, I don't either. It's just sad, really. Eh? It's kind of sad that is the sort of the lack of respect and freedom for people's, when I was in practice and I had children come in, parents would bring children. Well, my daughter's so oppositional. We say left, she says right. I said, well, look, if you can sort of like silly putty, just play with that. She's going to own the world. Okay. She's not going to be one that's going to sit back when someone tells her she can't do anything. She's going to sit in a meeting and she's like an outlier. Gladwell talks about outliers. I'm an outlier. You're probably an outlier, where you can't have too many of us around because nothing would ever get done because we would argue over everything on an agenda in a meeting. You need people to follow and so on, but she's not a follower. Toughest kids to raise, greatest adults to be around and watch. And so when you have a tough child, you think about that. And so part of that, I think, is genetic. The temperament we know is genetic, where children are tougher and just, they don't listen in the sense of they want to do it their way. It's a tough way to go, but with the right kind of structure and parenting, they're going to be incredible. The problem is when those children are exposed to bad things and don't have that good support, they can't achieve their true potential. But I think there's something about that oppositional thing that comes with the entrepreneurship that I think sometimes we, like you were saying, we push down in school, but we need that as adults.
Yeah, and I think it's a great outlet for people who don't fit the mold, right? Because if somebody,
who are you talking to?
No, but I mean,
you fit the mold though. Do you fit the mold, Gabe, yourself in what you do now? You think?
I think so. I think I can. Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I always did. But for me, I've always wanted more. It's just I have this sort of built-in desire to just want more. And
you mean financial or free time, or what do you think?
Both.
Yeah.
I think I would rather like have more free time, more so than work 60, 70, 8 hours a week and have an enormously large bank account. Like I think I would, especially, I mean, I'm in my mid 40s now and I haven't had a lot of free time, since my early 20s. So I think that I miss that more than say an extra 20, 30% in my bank account.
My youngest son says to me a lot, he said, Dad, are you in your boat? Are you okay? Are you like, you care about if you're in your boat, you don't need, and he said that a long time ago, meaning basically there are more things that are important once you get to a certain point than the money side. Cause someone asked me the other day, I said, as long as I could buy raspberries in Canada from San Francisco in the winter, I'm happy. I don't need much, I don't care about all that stuff. And it's all about, to me, this is kind of weird. Maybe it's because when you don't have a lot of talent, you think about this a lot. But every day, did I do everything I could do today to get the most out of today? Like, did I leave anything? When I played ball, I wasn't the most talented guy, but I'm telling you, I'd outwork anybody. And it's kind of like, did I do everything I could today to do something? Like, I still feel bad about that street person living by the store I went. I didn't do anything. Like, I didn't know what to do. She's a woman. I thought, well, if I go give her money, that's not going to be good. How do I can't call an agency because we don't have any. Like, what do you, like, how can we not, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I failed today on that. How would you have handled that, Gabe? Well, you see it in San Francisco. What would you do if you were in a situation like that?
So what I've done once, and, I to be perfectly honest, usually I don't do much because I don't know what to do and I don't know what I should do.
Right.
I remember this one time in Windsor though, because in Windsor, when I lived in Windsor, Ontario, many years ago, I lived right in downtown.
Yeah.
Just one block off of Ouellette Street in downtown. And so once in a while, we would have individuals coming there asking for, money, asking for change. And this one time, I never give them money, but this one time I did take the kid and I bought him a slice of pizza. There was a pizzeria across the street.
Nice.
I'm like, I'm not going to give you money, but look, I'll buy you a slice of pizza. It got him out of the cold for 10, 15 minutes. It didn't cost me more than $5 or whatever at the time. And that's probably what I could do, right? Especially if it's cold, it's winter, whatever. But apart from that, yeah, beyond that, I'm not sure what I could or would do.
I was 6 years old, and on Saturday we would go to Chatham, Ontario. I'd go with my dad, and we'd park the car, and he would have coffee with some friends he had, and I would basically play with a truck or hang out. And we'd parked the car, and we were walking towards the store. The guy was a clothier, a clothing store guy, and his brother, and a man walked up to my dad, said hi. My dad gave him some money, and we kept walking. Right, I'll never forget it. He gave him it was either $1 or 50 cents. Excuse me. So I said, Dad, what's going on? He goes, my dad was a gardener for the park, so he was at that time. He said he sleeps in the park. When I'm doing the flowers, sometimes I share lunch with him. He doesn't have a place to live. And I'm thinking, okay, so that was one incident. The only time, right, I saw that. And he was an African-American man who was having a lot of trouble. My dad told me a little bit about the story. He'd been in jail, been in prison, didn't have anybody. And I didn't know the impact that had on me until I was married. I was working as a teacher with street kids in London, Ontario, kids on the street. And you don't want to get too deep into all this stuff, but you think about childhood experiences that affect you later in life. And I also remember my dad, one day he came home, and it was a Wednesday. I was 7. And he said, we have a special guest tonight. You better be behaved. And I thought, oh, geez. Well, my dad worked for the government at that time as an agricultural guy. He did research on crickets and insects. And this man came from Africa. And he had the entire Africa. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We were probably the only family in that community to have a guest for dinner on a Wednesday from Africa, because we're not very racially mixed there, unfortunately. But that had such an impact on me to accept people regardless and learn so much. And my mom cooked the best food on a Wednesday, right? It was like, holy geez. And this guy told us stories and stuff. I think, Gabe, we're really impacted by the odd event like that happens. And also the negative, unfortunately, that ends up becoming part of who we are.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, we are the product of a whole bunch of random events that happen in our lives, right?
Fooled by Randomness. Did you read that one? Did you like that book, Fooled by Random?
I'm not sure I read it. Yeah.
You got to read it, man. It's all about how often we attribute success to something we did when it's actually random.
Yeah. And I believe that. I think a lot of people who study success, I think what I keep hearing is it's 1/3 preparation, 1/3 hard work, and 1/3 luck, right?
Yeah.
And then people who become successful, they forget about the luck part and they attribute it all to prep and hard work. And people who are not successful, they attribute it, mostly to luck. Well, so and so is luck is successful because it's all luck, and not necessarily the other parts. But it's roughly 1/3 each. I mean, just to put something out there.
I think one of the things that's really helped me too is when I watch the bees. A couple of things. Every 15 minutes, every one of those 40,000 bees knows how the queen's doing. They communicate every 15 minutes to every one of those 40,000 bees. Now, you've been in a lot of organizations. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, maybe talk a little bit more about the bees. Like, do you have bees on your farm at the moment?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what we did, and I'll get back to that story. So what we did is we converted 50 acres back to nature. So we have a 50-acre farm where I grew up, the fruit farm where I started the ice cream business. And true story, I like garlic. So I grow a little bit of garlic, twice the size, or 1.5 times kitchen table. I get 100 bulbs of garlic, beautiful garlic, right? The farm was cropped out to a man who grew soybeans, corn, sprayed and everything. I couldn't find a non-spray area for my garlic. So I said, this is dumb. Let's just stop doing this. Let's just turn it all over to nature. So we did. We stopped everything. We planted wildflowers, clovers. We have 2 ponds on the property. It's absolutely beautiful. And I started bringing in bees because I wanted to learn how to live with bees and how to understand them, because they're all dying everywhere. So, for example, just down here, we have a beehive that has a 24/7 cam live on it with infrared. So I can watch my bees. Today they were out. I posted on Instagram. They were out flying around today. Tonight, we saw a mouse there eating some dead bees at the entrance, which they do. They go around, they clean the hives at night. Mice run around, field mice, whatever, goes around, skunks sometimes. So it's a research. We have a site where people can do coloring books, all that stuff's free. And we have about 30 hives going into the winter. And a year ago, I lost them all because I didn't have any genetics. It was like a version of the ice cream business. I didn't have enough different genetics, and I didn't do some things I should have done, so it was my fault. So this last year, we brought in 5 different genetic species of bees, like from Saskatchewan, where it's minus 50, another couple sort of things. And I think we're going to be okay. And gradually, my goal would be for every 100 acres in Canada, there's 1 acre like ours where bees and wildlife can live. And I think it can happen. And if you drive from my house, Windsor and Niagara Falls in the summer, everything is cut on the side of the road. There's no place for bees or anything to get any food or wildlife or anything. So we need these little, I call them gas stations for nature in agricultural areas. Because on our farm, the first year we stopped, after 100 plus years of farming, 1 year we had 98 different wildflower species on the farm.
98.
Yeah, we haven't planted any of it.
98 different species of wildflower.
Yeah, where'd they come from? Like, gave 100 years of Roundup and sprays, and we had fruit trees, and apples you spray every week and all this. And then the insects came, and the natural pollinators, not just honeybees, bumblebees and carpenter and all these bees. And we had snakes. We haven't had snakes here in like 100 years. I don't know where they come all of a sudden. and we got red fox and deer and all kinds of stuff here. But we're just 150-acre farm, and all around us is, 45 minutes from Windsor, some of the best agricultural land in Canada.
Correct.
All around us is farmland, and we're this little 50 acres of heaven for these animals.
That's amazing. If you don't mind me asking, are your neighboring farms, are they okay with it? I mean, are they seeing more pests?
No, I had the weed police. We have weed police that came, and they were going to throw me in jail if I didn't let them cut certain weeds. And I said, well, you can't do that. You can throw me in jail, but you're not cutting. The whole farm is fenced. I paid to get it all fenced with new fence, so they would have had to cut the fence. And the guy actually said on the phone, he's going to bring the police in, and they were going to cut my fence. And I said, look, stuff's blooming. My bees are flying. So he came, we negotiated. What has happened with Roundup, you will not find in the growing season for the last 3 years we've done the intensive thing. There isn't one of our wildflowers on any other farm because they use Roundup. It kills everything. So you have our farm with, say, purple thistle, the national flower of Scotland, I think it is. You'll only find purple thistle on our farm pretty much, and a place in Italy where they grow it on purpose for honey. The purple thistle was considered horrible by people because last year we had a drought. So when the purple thistle went into seed, it was like snowing at our farm. All the seeds were flying. And one of the neighbors didn't like that and called the weed police, which is why we got into it. But we're good now. The farmers what we don't understand is even though most crops are self-pollinated, yields go up 10 to 15% if they're around bees.
10 to 15% higher.
Yeah, my farmers around me are making more money, but they never say thank you. They never get a call that says thank you for that.
That's funny. But they called the police on the purple thistle.
They called the weed police on me, Gabe. Yeah, it was quite something.
That's amazing. Okay, so getting back to the bees, about how, so you're saying that every 15 or 20 minutes the bees communicate with each other about the health of the queen. Yeah,
they know. So they communicate. So there's a group of bees around the queen, right? And the pheromone is sent out to all 40,000 bees. Because if she's not alive, within 15 minutes, they have an action plan. So when it gets to being smart with your money, to me, it's like, forget the past and future. Right now, do you know how you're doing? Do you really know how you're doing? Just like the honeybees. And if you don't, do you have an action plan? And it's the same with investing. People waste too much time thinking about yesterday, tomorrow, what's going to be in 5 years. What's happening right now with the company or whatever you're investing in or whatever you're doing. And that's another one of those lessons. And it's incredible. And then you have an action plan based on that. I think we spend so much time. Like I watched the dribble in the morning on CNBC and all those, Squawk Box and stuff, just to see what the dumb stuff is going on out there, because none of it makes it. They sell their own book and none of it makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense. That stuff is meaningless, totally meaningless, right? And so, but you watch it just to see the theater and everything. But for honeybees, there's no emotion. That's the other thing. People, we're too emotional, right? Honeybees are just cold, calculated, based on the facts. What do I have to do today? And they believe in probability. That's the other important lesson I want to talk about. So when bees swarm, they pick a house to go live in, right? So they're sitting, you've seen those pictures of a ball of bees. They send out scouts, they come back, and they vote on the best house to be in. They have to have a 75% agreement or they won't move. They can't be 85. Yeah, if they go 45, it won't. So the scouts go back.
They actually communicate somehow.
They come back and dance the direction of that new home. And if 75% don't dance that way, they won't go there. If they wait for 85, 90% agreement, they'll die because they only have 24 hours and they run out of food. If they go 50% of the time, it will be a bad house and they'll die too. So somehow in nature, 75 is the sweet spot. So that has taught me every time I look at an investment, I say, okay, based on what I know, what's the probability that this is going to work out or go to zero? What's the probability based on the information that I have, just like the honeybees? And I've learned, just like my initial question, new employees, if you can be 70% sure that you're not going to zero, that's an amazing investment. You still might go to zero 30% of the time. You still may not make it. And remember, even though 75% of the time the bees agree, only 20% make it to the next spring in Canada. 80% of those swarms will not make it. But at least they have a system, an unemotional system. 75 go. So let me ask you, when you make a decision to invest, do you have any probability in mind, or do you go on emotions or gut, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I try not to go by emotions and gut. I mean, I try to, tell myself that I've done some research on the company or I know the industry they're in. I looked at their financial statements. I understand the financial statements because I have a bit of a business background. But I mean, at some point, there is a definite randomness there that I can't escape. But I mean, I like the fact you brought up the fact that 80% of the honeybees won't make it to next spring. It's very similar to startups, right? 80, 90% of startups will fail. And I think you have a lot of experience investing in startups yourself.
Not a
right?
lot.
So Hank, maybe like run us through, what is your selection criteria for investing in a startup? What do you look for?
Well, I've learned over the years, right? I started just in what I know, which is real estate, healthcare, home healthcare, and a few of those things. But I've learned that the 100% important thing for me is the character of the founder or the person running it. I've invested in organizations or companies where, there's arrogance, there's pushback on financials. I had one startup tell me, you only invested 25 grand, so we don't need to share our financials with you. Oh. I said, well, maybe you're going to do actually, and they gave me my money back very quickly when we got into discussing, what they needed to do. But there's the arrogance, it's really the people. And when you say, and no one wants to run a business, the ones that are doing well started out thinking they want to run a business. They want to make cash flow. They want to make a profit. They want to be in it for a long time. It's not like I want to make up something and sell it to Google. No disrespect, because I know you work there. Or some other, they want to make a real business out of it. Those are exciting. And the work ethic. And probably someone, I look for things like character. Have they overcome obstacles? How did they handle failures? What is their work ethic? And is there respect? Do they listen? You don't have to do anything anybody says. But if you say something like do they listen and then throw it in the garbage? Or do they just immediately think of their next defensive move? So it's the people, I think, that's the most important thing. And probably the worst, I think, to invest in is a new idea. It's better to invest in a clone of something that's already out there.
Interesting. Okay.
New ideas are impossible. And I've done so many new ideas. Like when you have to convince the market that it's necessary, you have a problem. Like it's,
and I think you're onto something, because it's very, very difficult to predict which new idea is going to be successful and which new idea is going to stick, because most of them won't, right? Even if they have we
invested in a fake meat company. Okay. A fake meat company. I won't tell you the name. I hated the stuff. My kids loved it. I hated it. So I invested in the company. Became a 40 bagger. Went
Wow,
public.
40x. Amazing.
20 cents to $9.
Wow.
I sold it. It's now 14 cents.
Oh, it went all the way back down. Wow.
Yeah, it was never a viable business. I should have never invested in the first place. So it's just a random thing, right? Some of the best ones I invested in are just so exciting to watch what they're doing. It's just so phenomenal. The hard work, the work ethic. And then I get a little disappointed in some of the people I thought were leaders, were going to be strong, and it turns out, no, that's not there. So I'd say if I had to do it, like I selectively look at things, but it's not very easy to find. Like I only have 3 stocks in the portfolio because value is hard to find, true value. I find, and it's the same with real estate. About 2 years ago, people were buying everything, and it was ridiculous. I mean, they weren't investments. I mean, I don't know if you heard this, but in Canada, they just said that 80% of condos were bought by investors, quotations investors. Condos, not investment, man. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, especially, yeah. I mean, the problem I had with condos, I used to own 2 condos in Windsor, lived in one and rented out the other, and I had to sell both of them during the 2008, 2009 crash. I sold both of them at a loss, and I never made a penny off them. But the challenging thing there was the condo fee, because the condo fee is completely out of your control. Yeah. And what happened with the building was, when I bought them, like I think the condo fee on the 1 bedroom was something like $150 a month, and on the 2 bedroom was like 200 something bucks a month. And then, the building decided one day, the board of directors was like, we need some more money. And so the condo fee started going higher and higher and higher. And all of a sudden, my 2 bedroom, I couldn't cash flow it. I couldn't rent it for as much as it cost me. And like, ever since that, in America, we have the HOA, right? Which is very similar. Yeah. It's like, it's a fee that you got to pay every month, and you have no control over it. And if somebody's not managing that money well, then that means you're going to pay more of that in the future.
Is your house, do you think a personal residence is an investment? We could have that discussion, because I don't believe it is.
So in America, it is. I'll tell you a great story. So when I used to live in Guelph, in 2015, I moved back to Guelph, and I bought a house for my family, my wife and 2 kids, whatever. That was going to be our family home for the next, forever. And so life, is unpredictable. Things change. And then a year later, the family moves here to San Francisco. And so we still have that house in Guelph, and we rent it out. The exact same house, right? When I do my taxes, I pay taxes in both countries. So I have a cross-border accountant. I got to do my taxes in America, and I got to do my taxes in Canada. And that's the rules of the game. The exact same property, exact same rent, exact same everything, right? When I file my American paperwork, I get money back in taxes because of it, because in America, taxes favor landlords. In Canada, it's a tax liability. I have to pay money to the Canadian government. So the exact same property, it's a significant difference between America versus Canada. In America, yes, single family is great. I buy a single family. If I buy the right one, I can rent it out. It cash flows. I get a tax break on it, so my taxes go down. And of course, same thing. The tenant pays on the mortgage. It's going to appreciate over time. If I hold on to it for 5-10 years, I can sell it. I can refinance it. Yes, I believe a lot of people are very successful with single families. You're not gonna. It's very hard to scale single family because it's headache, but it's much better to, like, I think what a lot of people do is they start out with single family because it's easy to get into. They make some money after 5-10 years. And then they get out of that and they start getting into the multifamily space. But
what about your own house that you live in? Is that an investment?
You know what? This is a funny story. So my own house here in the Bay Area, I'm renting. I'm not buying a house in California.
Smart guy. You're a smart guy. I know. Why are you doing that?
I'll tell you why. I have 2 good reasons. One is I'm paying just over $4,000 a month in rent. If I were to buy this house, it's probably something like 1.2, 1.3 million right now. My mortgage, property tax, upkeep, whatever, it would be over $6,000 a month, maybe $6,500 or so last time we did the calculation. So I'm saving like $2,000 in cash every month, and I'm investing that $2,000 every month somewhere else, like in the Midwest. My investment properties are in the Midwest. And the other reason is if I were to all of a sudden come up, because there's no house, I'm not saying it's 1.3 million because I have high standards. There is no house in the San Francisco Bay Area for less than 1.2, 1.3 million. Like, it just doesn't exist. And so if I do want to buy a house like this, then all of a sudden now that, that ties up $250,000, maybe $300,000 of my capital. And now I'm, signing a contract that I'm going to be paying that $6,500 a month until I sell the property or get out of it. And that's not a financial commitment I want to make. I feel much safer and comfortable holding on to that money or investing it somewhere else. And so right now, renting works for me, and investing somewhere else makes sense.
Why
for
keep
me.
the Guelph property? What's your point there?
That's a great question. And that, my wife and I keep going back and forth with that one. So the Guelph property we bought it in 2015, and through some amazing miracle in Canada, some say it's a housing bubble, some say it's, fundamentals, whatever it is, the property prices have gone up tremendously in Guelph. So that house is now worth much, much more. So it's equity. Interestingly enough, it's rented out, and I have the same tenant in there since 2015. It's cash flow negative. So I'm losing money on it every month. When I hate doing that. Like, if you're losing money every month on a real estate property, like, get out of it and find something that cash flows. The challenge I have with it is my long-term plan, and this is one of the options I have, is that if one of my children wants to go to university in Guelph or in Canada, they can occupy it, they can move in. That's one of the only two ways you can get rid of a tenant, is if an owner moves back in,
Right.
or an owner decides to sell, in which case my daughter would move back in. We would do the same house hacking trick that you did with your children.
Sure. Yeah.
And at some point in the future, when I retire, I think my wife and I will move back there for a few years, make that our primary residence, and then sell it and pay zero capital gains. So
okay.
I have that option there.
Yeah.
But right now, I love the fact that it's got me a lot of equity. I hate the fact that it's cash flow negative. So
yeah, that's a hard one.
yeah, but that's life. Yeah, I'm not complaining. I mean, it could be a lot worse. So
are you a 9-to-5er or a full-time entrepreneur? What's your?
Oh, I wish I were a full-time entrepreneur. No, I'm a 9-to-5er. 9 to 5, and then I'm chasing a few opportunities along the side. But
do you enjoy it?
You know what? I'm very lucky. I work for a great company, and it's great benefits, great compensation. It's very difficult to leave. I think if I was in a situation where I was, say, when I worked in Windsor, Ontario, in the automotive industry, where the companies were losing money. Everyone, you had every day you walked in the front door, there was a chance you were going to get laid off. You're not getting a raise. You're not getting a bonus. In that kind of environment, is easy to leave. But when I have a job like I am right now, and I'm very fortunate, knock on wood, I definitely, it's very hard to leave.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I mean, I'll tell you this though, if 5 years from now, you and I are talking again, and I will say, Hank,
5 years, they didn't go well today.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think it's going to happen next year, but let's say, I got a couple of business ideas right now that I always got on the burner. But if a few years from now, you and I are talking again, and I say, Hank, I left my full-time job and I'm a full-time entrepreneur, that means things went really, really well. Because
I look forward to that coffee. We'll go to Erie
Hank.
Street or something.
Sounds good. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so it really stayed between the U.S. and Canada is very different. It's very different. It's interesting. I just recently interviewed, and that episode hasn't been published yet. It's getting published next week. I interviewed an Airbnb investor from Hamilton, and they started out. They had a full-time job. They started out renting out their basement apartment full time, and then they started renting out their basement apartment to like short-term renters through Airbnb. And then COVID happened, and then they said, hey, there are people who are looking for like 1, 2, 3 month stays. They're called medium-term renters. And they bought, it was so successful, they ended up putting a down payment on a couple of other houses. So now they had 3 houses in the Hamilton area they were renting out as Airbnb. And then they started managing other investors. When other investors would come to them and say, I'm going to buy this property, you manage this as an Airbnb and whatever. And even that gentleman was saying that they recently changed the bylaws in Hamilton. It's getting much more difficult to rent Airbnbs. You can't just own 3-4 properties and run them as Airbnbs. There's restrictions now. And he said that he just set up his LLC and he's going to be buying and managing Airbnbs in America. Because
I am not a fan, because it's a brand that you're totally 100% relying on that one brand. It's not high quality control. I won't stay at them anymore because of some of the quality issues here in Canada. It's very difficult. And there's one thing to own real estate, but you're also a hotelier. You are a service guy. At 2 a.m, I want a coffee. I've run out. You better get me a coffee. It's not about buying great real estate. It's about service to people, which we know from the Hiltons and all those other horrible hotels we've been. That's a good hotel. But if we go to a bad hotel, we don't usually say, well, the building didn't look good. We talk about the service issues. And
I agree. Yeah.
There's one brand that owns you. What if Airbnb goes under tomorrow? They never make a profit, rarely a real profit. So let's say they go to zero. What happens to all those places?
Yeah, at that point, you either try to flip it into a long-term rental, or you try to sell the property and hope you don't lose your money on it. Right?
It's tough. It's
tough. That is tough. Yeah, when things go south in real estate, then and that's what happened in 2009, 2010 in places like Phoenix, where house prices dropped in half over the span of a year, and a lot of investors were struggling to get their money out. A lot of them didn't get their money out. But
right. Well, right now we've got things going on. I don't know about the future, but right now there's a lot going on. People are hanging on, but the reality is not. I looked at some land today just for fun. It was it was 90 acres in Nova Scotia. It was $249,000 a year ago. They were asking. Now, then they went to 199, and now they're at 104. I think it's worth 50. And they were at 2 something a year ago. They're asking.
How many? You say 50 acres?
No, 94 acres.
94 acres for 50,000.
Ocean view,
right?
Elevated ocean view.
And I guess my question is, I mean, why is it? I mean, to me, if I hear that number, the first thing I think of, not knowing anything, I'm thinking that's a steal. Why doesn't somebody line up and just buy it? At
50 it is.
Now, is the land? Is the land like? Does it have farm value, or is it too rocky?
Beautiful trees. It's all forest.
It's all forest. Okay.
Lumber. Think lumber. Beautiful. High-speed internet on a highway. Oceans across the street.
Hypothetically speaking, if you were or somebody, an investor, would buy it for, say, 50,000 because it's a good deal, how would you? What would be your plan to make it profitable, or to get your money back, or to earn an?
I would just land bank it. We land bank. I think I told you when Biden won the election, I land banked all over Nova Scotia because of carbon offsets. So I think we bought 700 or 800 acres, all ocean view, different parts to develop. Some were ocean front, some were ocean side, we call it, where the ocean's across the street. But it's all on paved roads with high-speed internet. And I'll probably never develop it, but maybe some generation of my family will.
And sorry, Hank, what do you mean by the term land bank?
I sleep better at night because I've got land in the bank that if things go bad, I can always go cut a tree down and get a deer and kick the soil, and I own it.
Interesting. So I imagine at this time, if you hold it for 5 years, 10 years, I mean, you have to pay
50. No, we're talking 50. We're talking hundreds of years probably.
So you have to pay tax on it every year. Like, there has to be some upkeep, right? Are you getting any kind of a cash return on the land?
Well, the land is, there's no, some places the taxes, because it's considered lumber resource, is zero in taxes. No debt, so you don't have to worry about any payments or anything. And the money happened with taxes when we made lots. We made a total of 27 lots out of some of the oceanfront properties, just to have them, as they're starting to change the rules by the ocean for preservation. They're trying to stop people from developing land near the oceans all across Canada, basically. But we're very high up, so we do a lot of, I would say, predicting land and flooding and making sure we're 50, 60, 70 meters above if we can. So we just bought one last year. We call it the Ocean House, which is above, it's in a mountain actually, and the ocean's across the street. So the water would have to, New York would be gone, Miami would be gone before we'd have to worry about having water at our property. So I just feel comfortable with land. I just like land. And at that time we bought before things got crazy. So we bought, some of them weren't for sale. That was another great education. We started finding out who owned properties and getting a hold of them and said, hey, would you like to sell your property? And, we bought one from an economics professor at the University of Toronto. We bought another one from an investment group out of Calgary. They own land in Nova Scotia. So we bought a number of properties that weren't for sale, which was a great education.
So how did you get a hold of them? Was it cold calling? Was it mailing them postcards, emails?
Oh, actually, we would target the property first. And we'd say, okay, we'd like to own this property in our brain. We'd say, we'd like to own this one. Then we'd find out who owned it, which in Nova Scotia is fairly easy. And then I got my private investigator's license 3 years ago. So it's pretty easy to find out things. So we found out where they were and a bit about them. And we would just call them up on the phone, say, hey, you got this property. We'd like to make you an offer. And in one instance, I think it was the last one we did. We bought a couple lots from an individual. We agreed on a price, and we now have student properties on it. Beautiful, beautiful development. And he first said yes, signed it, and then he said, I don't think I want to close. The first time we ever had to litigate someone for breach of contract.
Wow.
Never had to do that ever. And they got served. And one was a school teacher. She got served at school. I made sure she got served during a staff meeting. And the next day, they went down and signed the papers because we had a deal. It was a clear deal. And I offered whatever he wanted. I said, what would you like for those 2 lots? $70,000 a lot. And we purchased them and built on them. We built student housing. It's right near the university there in that community. But those are all like, those were real educations. They weren't for sale. He said, I'm never selling those lots. I said, well, how about this? I called him up, I don't know, over the course of 2 months, I think it was. Came up with a number and we agreed. Some of the best deals are not for sale.
Yeah. And that's what I keep
target
hearing.
The land first. I would never send out random stuff because you don't want to own 99% of what's out there. You want to pick something that you think makes sense and it's got the right system. That's why right now I could not, like, probably for 9 months I looked, there's nothing in Halifax or Nova Scotia I'd want to buy. It's overpriced. Everything's overpriced.
Even in Nova Scotia. Okay.
Yeah, because it's about the value. The question is, when we talked about the price of a house in San Francisco, my question is, how do you assess value of something? In the book, I talk about a pair of boots, right? How do you know what a pair of boots are worth? And use that analogy in smart money and take it to investing. Is it what other boots sell for? Is it what it costs to replace it? There's no cash flow in boots. But getting people to think about true value has nothing. I mean, look at Richard Branson when he bought the island in the Caribbean. Did you hear about that story?
No.
Okay. So there's an island for sale in the Caribbean, 3.2 million pounds they want. This was, I don't know, 20 years, 15 years ago. Branson comes along and says, I'll give you 150 grand. They laugh at him. They tell him he's crazy. 2 months later, he buys it for 170.
Wow.
That was the value.
Wow.
It wasn't what people were going to pay for it. I always make a claim. Here's what I think it's worth. I know you think your house is worth, your duplex is worth 500. I think it's worth 200. And here's why. We'd make 10 offers and one would get accepted. And of 3 that got accepted, we would close one. So we would have to have 30 accepted offers to buy a building when we were really into acquiring buildings. And they're all wonderful deals, amazing deals, but a lot of work and a lot of rejection, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hear that quite often here in America amongst real estate investors, right? Is that, and I've never tried this myself, right? But there are people who basically do all kinds of things to try to find, like you say, off-market deals, right? Some people drive around town and find buildings that they like, or like what you're referring to, or buildings that are maybe neglected or abandoned, or it looks like nobody's living in them. And they do as you suggest, right? They find the owner, they contact the owner, and they make an offer, etc. And it's like a funnel, right? Like for every 100 phone calls you make or 100 postcards you mail out, you'll get maybe 5 or 10 responses. Out of those, maybe 1 or 2 will be a reasonable deal that you can move forward on. And so it's like a sales funnel. You start with a big number.
But that has to be, listen, Gabe, that has to be a good investment. It's not just you like the building. It has to be something that's going to make value. So it has to cash flow excessively. The cap rate's got to be above 10. Should be probably a 14, 15 cap rate. And you say that, people in Toronto, they laugh at you. It's a 3 cap. Well, I'm not going to buy until it's a 15 cap. Well, but everybody's in a hurry, right? Everybody's in a hurry. You don't have to do anything. Sit back and wait. I mean,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because that's one of the reasons why there are so few. Even though, like here in Silicon Valley, salaries are very high, but it's almost impossible to become a real estate investor because nothing here cash flows, right? Like you said, your cap rate is less than the mortgage rate. I mean, your cap rate is 3 or 4, and then you're trying to borrow money from the bank at 5 or 6. It'll never, ever, ever cash flow.
So why would you do that?
Yeah, and so the only way you can justify it is maybe you're hoping that it's going to appreciate over time, and that's it, right? Which is a horrible way to look at it because
you're close to Vegas. Just go to Vegas and put it on green or something.
I agree. I fully agree. Which is why, like I have zero desire to invest in real estate here in the Bay Area. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, I tell you, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, there's some opportunities, but you have to still do your work. I mean, it's not easy. But I really think that part of the world is incredibly underappreciated. I mean, we're talking the ocean, we're talking 7 or 8 months. It's pretty nice. You got a couple brutal months, but so what? You're on the ocean, beautiful spots.
And how did you end up out there? I mean, you grew up in Southwestern Ontario, went to school in Michigan. How did you end up?
Well, it was totally random because we had our son move out there, and we tried to buy a building that he could manage, and that's how we started. We had I didn't know anything about it out there, and our other son's now out there. Our other son went out there and started a property management company. He's a real estate broker, and he's doing all kinds of businesses out there. So he manages all the real estate, and he owns a company, a real estate development company.
So Hank, I think you mentioned a few minutes ago that you are now a private eye. You got your private eye license.
I did.
Tell me the story behind that one.
Oh man, you want it? Okay, I know we're running out of time. Maybe this will be 2 shows, but I'll tell you. So 5 years ago, as a psychologist, this is a true story. And now that I'm retired, I can tell you the truth behind this because I'm working on a podcast called How to Steal $2.8 Million and Get Away with It. I was part of what's called the Ontario Psychological Association. So in Ontario, like in your state, there's a licensing body, but then there's an association. Okay. So I was part of the association. I start getting mails saying, you need to contribute to the legal fund. And I said, what's this for? And I'm an investor still at this time, right? I'm saying, show me your financials. What do you mean legal fund? Turns out I go and I take the class because I'm the training because I'm starting to think there's something going on. I go down to Toronto to interview these people, and they tell me that $2.8 million is missing from this organization. Okay, $2.8 million. This is a small organization that has income of about $500,000 to $600,000 a year. How do you steal $2.8 million over the course of 10 years? So I start investigating and I start asking questions. Okay. They don't like it because it turns out very quickly they realize I'm trying to find out what happened. I'm not on their side. I'm not going to hide this. They report me to my governing body, the College of Psychologists, for asking too many. They said I was inappropriately asking questions. And I wrote an article that was published called 10 Signs a Not-for-Profit is Stealing Your Money. And it was published in a bunch of newspapers. And I mentioned them because I only mentioned the truth, right? I had to stop for 5 years while this went on. It took 5 years, okay, for this thing to go through the little Meanwhile, I'm a psychologist because it had nothing to do with my practice. It had to do with me as a PI, but it's a long story because there's something else going on I can't talk about with that because it's going to court and anyway. Because I'm a freedom of speech guy, just like you. When your parents come from a communist country, no one's going to tell you can't speak the truth. So I started investigating, and I've now been able to, since November, get back into this because I'm no longer a psychologist, so they can't go after me anymore because they would if I was still a psychologist for asking these questions. The bottom line is I know where the $2.8 million went, and there's also other monies missing, and we have no statute of limitations in Canada for these crimes. And I've told them, I'm coming to get you because I know who stole the money. One of the people involved in the organization was the head of discipline for my college. The person who was part of the organization that had an entire office of 2.5 employees when the $2.8 million went missing over the 10 years she ran the organization was the head of the governing body discipline committee. Just a coincidence, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why I got into investigation, but it turns out it was a great thing because as a PI, I can investigate and find out backgrounds on properties, owners in a good way, understand where they're coming from, why they're selling, and in my clinical background, I love doing interviews. So if I can get a person on the phone and talk, I'll find out enough that helps me understand why they're selling, what I can do to meet their needs so they feel good. These are all good deals. You ask people, what would you like? How much would you like for the property? And you negotiate a bit, but you work it out. So business-wise, it makes sense for you, and it makes sense for them. And you fix the need that they have. One property we bought, the Ocean House, a lot of people had offered. They never accepted any offers. There were, I think, 9 people on the will of this property. So it sat empty for 7 years. And turns out they just didn't want to be pressured. So we put in an offer and they accepted our offer because I said, you can close whenever you want. Just write it in. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, I don't care. And that was the reason nobody else could buy it, because no one would do that. They always want to say, I need it in 30 days, 60 days. I said, I don't care. Whenever it's a tough thing going through a will and you have to go through all this settlement stuff. You guys can all decide. And we were able to buy it. I think one of the best real estate deals we ever did. It's called the Ocean House. 3.8 acres and the ocean's across the street. It's a beautiful house we live in now, part-time.
Nice. Very nice. Hank, I really enjoyed this conversation. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Time's flying. Holy geez.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. I just looked at the clock and we're well over an hour now. I apologize I took up this much of your time, but I really enjoyed the talk. Hank, you recently wrote a book about the bees on your family farm. I think the book is called What Grandpa Learned from His Honeybees. And I think it's got all kinds of stories about life and business and just all kinds of valuable lessons in there in general. I'll put that link to the book in the show notes.
Thanks, Gabe.
And I really appreciate your time. Hank, if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's a great way to get a hold of you?
They can go to wildflowerbeefarm.com and you can get a hold of me there. There's a place where you can email, and you can also get free coloring book downloads of bees on the farm. My wife did those. We have videos. There's actually lesson plans for teachers that are free. It's a total free site that we're doing for education purposes. Wildflowerbeefarm.com, and the book's on Amazon. We wrote it for our grandkids.
How many grandkids do you have now?
3. So if I sell 3 books, they've already got their 3 books. We're happy.
Congratulations. That's excellent.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, Hank, have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Gabe. You too.